You're supposed to remind me. Okay. As we move into cardiac emergencies, again, it's the heart's ability to pump and deliver that oxygen to where it needs to go. And we know what happens when that oxygen is not sufficient to maintain the needs of the body. It's just like your bank account not having enough funds for you to maintain the lifestyle you're accustomed to.
Hey,
or you like
echo, or like a stuffy echo.
What's that?
You're not very clear, like you have like a stuffy echo or like some kind of echo.
Well, I'm using my earpod, and I'm also on my Mac instead of my regular computer because I took it to work yesterday, and I was going to be at the office to do class. However, I decided just to do it here so I could kind of rest a little bit before going to the office for the rest of the day.
Oh.
So, is this a little bit better?
So still has like an echo.
Still an echo?
Yeah.
I hear you good. I hear you great. I don't know what Chloe's talking about, Luke.
Do you see that dirty look she gave you?
I didn't, but I would rather not see it.
I mean, I can still hear you. It's just that you have like a little echo in it.
How does it sound, George? Is it good or is it echoey? You're the tiebreaker.
You sound good to me, Lou.
High five, George.
Oh, you should have seen that look also. She's still giving you that look. That beady eye, like, you guys are in for it. Oh, just go. What? No earpods today, there, Mr. Paul?
No, not today. They're charging up right now.
Yeah, my hopefully are still good, but I found out they won't last an entire class, so I'm just using one instead of both.
Oh.
But so yeah, as far as the heart goes, we know what happens when the heart's not pumping adequately. And we kind of threw in there, although we talked about it, about acute coronary syndrome, congestive heart failure. With the neurological emergencies, we talked about issues with the brain, such as CVA, TIA, and then we talked about seizures and syncope, and so something is happening for the brain not to function adequately. Today we do diabetes, and in a little bit we've talked about the importance of sugar, and that is the body needs the sugar in order to create energy along with oxygen, and so we need to figure out exactly what's going on. Now this particular chapter is diabetes, so there's something going on that is preventing the body from adequately using sugar that we eat or that we ingest, that's broken down. And so I'm gonna look at this. And so we really have to understand this part. And I've mentioned to you guys in the past about not learning a list of signs and symptoms, and you very well could. But when you understand the pathophysiology of it, it's gonna make it easier to really see what's going on and know what to expect the body to be doing when it's not getting enough sugar or it has too much sugar. So there are things that we'll be able to see. Now, diabetes itself afflicts roughly about 30 million people, maybe a little bit less, but give or take about 30 million people. That's about 10%. Or right around 10% of the U.S. population. Certain races tend to have more cases of diabetes. No wonder it's quiet. Rose is not here. Remember, she texted me. I'm sorry, I said that. Anyway, so with diabetes again, there's certain races that are more susceptible to it, and Hispanics being one of those. There's higher in probably all that pan dulce we eat. And pozole, no, not pozole, champurrado and buñuelos and tamales and all that other stuff. If I'm making you hungry, that's intense.
Good stuff.
Can't wait for Christmas.
Yep. Everything comes out.
Is buñuelos. Nobody makes buñuelos like my mother.
You gotta let me try them.
Oh hell no, those are for me. Me. I'm selfish. Just taking a roll real quick. I could have forgot to do it. I'm not. Hey, there's Juan. Good morning, Juan.
Morning.
I'm not seeing Mr. Fish in bed this morning.
Who, Josh?
Yeah. Probably is. He's not on my screen right now. All right. I heard from Mr. Josh. Okay. So going back to diabetes. So as I was saying that diabetes is the body's inability to really get enough sugar or any sugar into the bloodstream. And it's going to be based on the pancreas' ability to do that or to produce insulin or a reduction of insulin production. So we know that sugar is the major source of fuel for the cells. The cells need to get that sugar in to help with the energy production. And we've talked about how the brain is very susceptible to, or very sensitive to the lack of glucose. Remember that the brain doesn't require insulin in order to get the glucose out of the blood to be used for energy production because it's that important and that maybe selfish but I think being selfish is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
The other thing too is that glucose has a tendency to affect water, and so where the glucose molecules go, water's going to go there too. And so later on, when we talk about hyperglycemia, we'll talk about not why it is, but what's happening, why the people are presenting the way that they are. And unfortunately, or unfortunately, what happens when there's too much sugar in the bloodstream, we know that the blood goes through the kidneys, and we'll talk about it more in renal emergencies, but the blood goes through the kidneys. And I think I've mentioned to you guys how we have the blood pressure to push the blood through the kidneys, particularly what we call the nephrons, the filters. So it's kind of like making coffee, right? The water gets pushed through that filter, through the coffee through the filter, and down below we have that nice liquid gold, so to speak, the coffee. And I'm hearing kind of an echo, not an echo, somebody back. So anyway, so any excess glucose that doesn't get filtered out will go, excuse me, will go into the, will be sent down to the bladder, and then we excrete it through the urine. And I don't know if you guys knew, but back in the day, back in the 1800s, 1700s, you know how doctors found out that a patient was diabetic?
So we're peeing a lot?
Nope. That's a sign nowadays, but back in the day, how did they
Their
test?
pee was like more intense yellow.
Nope. That's well, if they're dehydrated, it's going to be darker yellow, but
All right.
any ideas? No ideas?
No.
The doctors used to drink the urine to taste it, to see if it was sweet. If it was, they were diabetic.
That's weird.
That's pretty gross.
Yeah, we think that now,
Oh,
but
wow.
back then it was part of the job. It was part of the job. So. Oh, this is an interesting activity. Anyway. All right. So I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Oh, you could probably hear me walk. Okay, I'm back. So the first hormone that is involved with sugar and controlling glucose levels is insulin. Where's the insulin created? Or where is insulin created at?
The pancreas?
The pancreas?
Exactly. It is created in the pancreas. And so what insulin does is allows glucose to move out of the blood and into the cells. And then also, what insulin does is when that sugar gets into the liver, and remember that blood flows through the liver. It helps metabolize stuff within the blood. And so what happens in the liver is that the insulin is going to help the glucose be converted into glycogen. So it's going to store glycogen in the liver. And that's going to come into play in just a minute. Okay. So liver's created, blood goes into the liver. Insulin helps the liver convert glucose into glycogen. And so what happens is, as we eat, our body detects a rise in our blood sugar. And so the pancreas is then directed to release insulin into the bloodstream, where the bloodstream is going to help get that glucose into the cell. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yes.
what's going to happen to that blood sugar level?
It's gonna increase.
The blood sugar level? No. When the insulin is released, what's going to happen to that glucose level?
Decrease.
It's going to decrease. Okay, it's going to decrease. Okay, so, however, what happens is sometimes the pancreas is either unable to produce insulin, or it doesn't produce enough insulin, or the insulin is not effective enough to get all the blood into the cells. So that's really where diabetes comes in, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But that insulin goes into the bloodstream as the blood glucose level starts to go up. The insulin also helps the glucose, or helps the liver turn glucose into glycogen. Remember that the brain doesn't need the help of insulin to get the sugar. Okay, they only metabolize glucose, so it's not going to need insulin's help. All right, so another hormone is called glucagon. And so what happens is that when your blood sugar drops, because the glucose is very, very important for the body to function. And remember, we've talked about how the body is going to do what it can to take care of itself. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is one of those ways in that the body has the glucagon go into the liver, and it releases that stored glycogen. And it then converts that glycogen into sugar. So think about the glucagon that's in through the body, and it needs to let out some of the stored prisoners. Or maybe you want to think about the backup. And so it goes and helps the liver convert that glycogen into glucose. That's what glucagon is. It helps the liver convert the glycogen into glucose, because the body's needing that burst of sugar, burst of glucose, and it doesn't have anything coming in right now. Now, glucagon also helps convert other non-carbohydrate substances into glucose. So because it's needing to get that glucose right now, it's going to do what it can. It's going to draft whoever it can as long as it's not a carb. Because for whatever reason, those carbs just weren't helping. Okay. So questions on insulin, questions on glucagon.
No.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So there's another hormone that we use it for other things, and that's epinephrine. So epinephrine, what it does, we know it's part of which system?
The endocrine?
Well, it's part of the endocrine system, is also part of the sympathetic nervous system, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It stimulates the body's reaction to the fight or flight impulse. And so you get that adrenaline rush, right? Something scares you, you need to be ready to fight, and you go. Now, the question is, do you have time to take to go number 2, to have a bowel movement while you're running away from that saber-toothed tiger?
No.
No.
Or the jealous girlfriend because your son's up tonight?
No.
Now, what happens to the stomach when you're in the fight or flight response? Remember that there's no gastric motility. In other words, you're not breaking down foods. If you eat, it's just going to stay heavy in your stomach. And if it's in the intestine, again, that's not getting processed. So are you able to break down other sugars by eating?
No.
No, right? And so how you can get that energy burst if you're unable to eat and process the foods that you're eating? I don't know. That's what epinephrine does. That's exactly what epinephrine does.
So it stops the insulin?
Correct. It stops the secretion of insulin, and it's going to help promote the release of glucose from the liver and the other places that it could find it from. Wow. That tasted horrible. Okay. So yeah, since you're unable to eat to get glucose, or you're a little preoccupied to eat, but because your stomach stops working with that food, your digestive tract basically stops working with that food. You need to find an energy store, right?
Yes.
And so that's what insulin is, that's what epinephrine is doing, is it's finding that store of glucose, of energy for you while you need it. Okay. Pretty neat, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So as far as insulin, like I said, we eat, our sugar levels go up, insulin's released, and the sugar levels go down. So even if you're not a diabetic, when you eat, your sugar still goes up. It's not going to go up very much. It could be, a couple hours after eating. It could be about 120, 130, 140. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when you're fasting that if your sugar is over 140, 160, 180, 200, whatever it is, then that's when we have an issue. Because again, what diabetes is the body's inability to either A, produce insulin, or B, use it adequately, or C, inadequate production of insulin as well. Okay. So to determine what the person's blood glucose level is, actually, before I go there, so any questions?
No.
Okay. So really the concept here is understanding what insulin is. It's a hormone that's released by the pancreas that helps the blood sugar level go down. It also helps the liver store or convert that glucose into glycogen, which is stored in the liver. Okay. So that's what insulin does. It helps convert glucose into glycogen to be stored in the liver. The other thing too about glucagon, before I forget, is that glucagon is also produced in the pancreas, just a different part of the pancreas. Okay. But it activates the liver to release that stored glycogen. Okay. So, you guys got to practice the BGL skill? You guys get a chance to check sugars on each other?
No.
No.
Didn't?
No.
Frickin' Paul. All right. When you guys are there on the 15th, I'll work on that with you guys. How much of the vital signs did you guys do?
We did pretty everything on the vital signs.
PR bells?
Yeah.
Okay. But I've updated it and I need to create a new sheet with that. Excuse me. The new PR bells that I use is pulse ox, respirations, blood pressure, eyes, lung sounds, level of consciousness, skin signs, and sugars.
Skin signs and shivers?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to be creative, I got the sugars. A black lady saying that she has diabetes. I got the sugars. Or anybody from the South. They're saying they got diabetes. I got the sugars.
Just don't mess with their sweet tea.
Exactly. Or the fried okra.
Mm-hmm.
I never tried fried okra.
No?
I tried the hush puppies and they weren't too bad. And I came to find out how I got the name hush puppy.
Lou, do you drink soda?
I drink, when I do, I drink diet soda.
Okay, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
So 7-Up it's like lemon lime, right?
Uh-huh.
So some lady goes up to me yesterday and she's like, do you guys have 7-Up that isn't lemon lime?
Oh, they had different flavors.
Yeah, but it's still the basis of that lemon lime flavor.
Yeah. And she got mad when I told her we didn't.
Some people.
But like it still has like the lemon thing, right? Like all of them?
Yeah. It's like with Coke. You have Coke, but then you have cherry Coke, which is still Coke. It just has the cherry part of it.
There's lime or lemon. There's orange. There's like different flavors.
Yeah, but it's still the basic
Yeah.
Taste of Coke. You just put something else on there.
Do you know that McDonald's has a specific way of how their Coke is instead of like how they come in those little boxes? Theirs is actually in containers. That's why it tastes better.
That what? I'm sorry?
The McDonald's, you know how like McDonald's has like Coke?
Uh-huh.
They have it instead of having it in those little packages of those boxes of the Coke machines, they have them in aluminum cans. Or like they're like in some kind of containers. But that's why they taste better, is because of the can taste or the container.
Well, it is a different taste than what you get in the regular soda cans. And that's because each machine is different because they have to adjust the carbonated water level.
Yeah.
That's something that they do like on a weekly basis is they'll get their little, because I remember used to doing this when I worked at Del Taco years ago. You had to put in the stuff and it would separate the soda water and the syrup, and you had to get the right ratio. So every store is different where they try to adjust that ratio. But you know, they really make a killing because they get a big box, at least they used to, of syrup. And I think that's what you're talking about. And they can get a boatload of drinks out of that, and you sell a cup for $2-3. And you know, the syrup doesn't cost you very much. Well, back in the day, it was like $50 for a case of syrup. So nowadays, it's probably gone up, obviously, but because this was 30 years ago. But still, with as much as they're charging for a soda, you know, they are making a killing off of you. And that's why they have no problem with free refills, because they already made money off of you. And doesn't how many times you serve yourself, you know, considering most people might refill their cup once. So it's still a killing. I like the soda machines, like at least I've seen some Jack in the Boxes and Burger King that have those machines that are like 500 flavors.
Oh,
You can kind of choose and then put little extra flavors and stuff.
yeah.
If you've ever seen those cartridges, they're very, very tiny, but they still get a lot of stuff. Interesting. Yeah, it's yeah, people are weird. So going back, Abraham, wake up. I guess my stories bore him. Sorry. I'll keep you awake. I'll use you as my examples. I'm my go-to person this morning. Cool. All right. So we were talking about practicing vital signs and the sugars. So did you guys get any practice on glucometers
No.
or with glucometers? Okay, that's
No.
something we'll have to go through then. But that's the way to check the blood sugar level, is by utilizing a glucometer. We on ambulances carry them out here. It's not a big deal. If your patient is diabetic, they're bound to have glucometers. Although I have plenty here, some for my dad, some for me. But excuse me. But glucometers are there to measure the blood glucose levels, and it's a real simple procedure. Excuse me. We prep the finger. We poke the finger with a lancet. We obtain a sample of the blood with a glucometer and get the reading. A normal range, and it depends which lab you ask, honestly. I know the books talk about, oh, it's between this range and this range. Everybody's different. Like your book is saying normal range is 70 to 140. And I've seen others where it's 80 to 120. So just kind of think about 70 or 80 to 120 is the normal range. Anything above 120 can be abnormal, but remember, after eating, a normal person expect it to be between 120 and 140. Okay, it's how it goes over time without any medications that determines whether you're diabetic or not. Although there's other ways to tell, and we'll talk about the 3 Ps. Okay.
So what is the normal range? 80 to what?
80 to 120. That's a good rule of thumb. Like I said, different sources have different numbers. Like I said, kind of, depends on which lab to use, which book you're reading. Okay. I've seen some say, well, normal range is 80 to 100. No, that's kind of cutting it close, and you're kind of making people diabetics that don't, that don't need to be diabetics. Although there's signs that you're going to be able to see to really establish whether they're diabetics or not. And then I will tell you my own story when we get there. Okay. All right. So what is diabetes? It's actually called diabetes mellitus. That's the disease, diabetes mellitus. And there's 2 types of diabetes. There's what we call a type 1 diabetic or an insulin-dependent diabetic. And type 1 diabetes really is child onset diabetes. And what happens with type 1 diabetics and with kids is that their body does not produce any insulin whatsoever. And so without that insulin, what happens to that sugar? It's not being
stays
sent
high.
to the cells. What was that?
Oh, no, I was saying that it would stay high without the insulin.
Exactly. The glucose level is going to stay high because that glucose is not getting into the cell. So insulin-dependent diabetics or type 1 diabetics don't produce any natural insulin. And so they have to shoot up insulin after every meal or even before every meal or both. There's also type 1 diabetics that they use an insulin pump to give them a steady supply of insulin. Because again, remember, their body is not producing any insulin whatsoever, so they need that steady supply from an outside source. Now, the other type of diabetic is a type 2 diabetic or adult onset diabetic. Now, they can be insulin-dependent diabetics, type 2 diabetics, and that's because it occurred in adulthood. But there's also, and this is a type 2 diabetic, a non-insulin-dependent diabetic. It means they don't need insulin. There's other ways to lower the blood sugar. Like, for example, me, I'm actually both. I take oral medications. You saw me take my meds just a few minutes ago. So I take my medication. There's a tablet, actually 2 of them, that I take to help lower my blood sugar. And I'm also insulin dependent, kind of, sort of, because I do take 2 types of insulins to help control my blood sugar. So they could be a combination. Now, along with medication, also to help control sugars or diabetes, is exercise, eating healthy. And both of those are difficult to do when you work in EMS. But there are things that can be done. Okay. And so what happens with type 2 diabetics is that the pancreas is producing insulin, just either A, not enough, or B, it's not good enough insulin. So there's a problem with the creation of insulin. Okay, so questions on that part?
No.
Okay, so what's a type 1 diabetic?
Low blood sugar. Or they
What's type 1 diabetic?
Insulin dependent.
And what's the other part of that?
The body doesn't produce any insulin, so they need an insulin pump or insulin after every meal.
Or before? And what is the other unique characteristic about type 1 diabetics?
they get it from childhood.
Exactly. It's called juvenile, or juvenile onset, or pediatric onset, child onset. Well, I forgot what term I used earlier, but juvenile onset works pretty good. All right, here's the other thing about juvenile onset diabetes, which used to be bad news. Now with medical science, it's improved their lives, but back in the day, and even into the 80s and early 90s, if a child was diagnosed with juvenile onset diabetes, they didn't have a long lifespan. They usually died in about their early 40s. It was not good news. It's kind of like, we didn't talk about sickle cell, but kind of like sickle cell anemia. They lived about their 40s or 50s max, because something's going to happen that's going to cause them to die early, or at a young age, I should say. So that was the thing about juvenile onset diabetes, was if you're diagnosed with diabetes as a child, you can expect, well, I guess 40s is a long life, but not long as it should be. But nowadays, it's a lot better. Did you guys ever see, I think it was National Lampoon's European Vacation?
Wait.
No.
No.
Why am I not surprised?
Yes.
Top Gun is available on Amazon, so watch that movie. You haven't seen it, watch that movie before you watch the sequel.
Top Gun?
Shotgun. Top Gun.
I think everybody's seen Top Gun.
You want to bet?
I've seen it like 1,000 times. It's one of my favorite movies.
We've already established that you're born in the wrong era.
I am.
You should be close to retirement age, in reality. Would you say you're 28?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you were born in the wrong era.
I'm
But
telling
no,
you.
I had students where I mentioned Top Gun, and they're looking at me all weird. I'm like, what? You guys haven't seen it? It's like, what are you talking about? I haven't seen it.
I believe there's a second one.
Exactly. The sequel's coming out. It should have been out like now. I don't know when they reassigned it for release.
It's gonna be
I
nothing.
just can't wait. What was that?
It's still not gonna be nothing like the first one.
I know, but you know what I've kind of noticed? It has a similar plot line.
Yeah, they do.
But I think it
I kind of don't like that, because it's like The original is awesome.
Yeah.
But I think it has to do with
So-
Bruce's son or something.
What was that, Sequoia?
So I think it has to do with Goose's son.
Yeah.
Oh,
We
really?
noticed
Nice.
somebody dies and he's still a maverick and there's still flybys and there's still motorcycle riding. Because I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't seen it. Oh, they pushed it back to December 23rd. Dang it.
What's that movie about?
Top Gun?
Yeah.
It's about naval aviators.
It's
And Tom Cruise is like the I don't even know how to say it.
don't say your idol.
Oh,
Well, in the original Top Gun, Tom Cruise is a F-14 Tomcat fighter pilot. He's in the U.S. Navy.
so he's like the,
And basically, he gets a chance to go to Top Gun, which is the Navy's like elite flight school for naval aviators. You know, to be an ace pilot. And so he goes there, and it's just his experiences while he's at Top Gun. And it really, back then, the Top Gun flight school was at Miramar Air Station, not Miramar Air Station. But that's where Top Gun used to be. And then the Navy got out of that base, and they moved it over into Nevada. But I actually have a picture. I've been there a couple times. But the house actually exists. If you saw the original Top Gun, remember when he goes to Kelly McGillis's house, Charlie's house, like
Yeah.
where he's like, "I'm gonna take a shower," and she's like, "Oh no, you don't." That is actually an actual house. It's a pretty small house too, believe it or not. But that's an actual house in Oceanside. It's right by the beach. And they built around that house. They had talked about demolishing it or doing something with it, but people have said, no, this is they almost want to call it a historical landmark. And they've saved it. The unfortunate thing is that it's fenced off. I mean, it has a chain link fence, but it looks kind of sad all by its lonesome. And actually, I took pictures. I was out there about 2 years ago, I want to say.
oh wow.
3 years ago, I was out there and I took pictures. And there's a sign that said, you know, used it Top Gun and everything. So everybody down in Oceanside, in San Diego, they call it the Top Gun house because it was featured Top Gun. So, but anyway, I digress. Talking about sweet movies. But so I don't even know how we got talking on Top Gun, but we were talking about
National Lampoon, the European. You mentioned that.
Thank you. And talking about movies, there was an actress in there by the name of Dana Hill. She played the daughter in one of those movies. Because if you ever saw any of those
Oh
movies,
yeah.
had different kids.
She was the annoying one though, I thought.
Yeah, she was. Well, her name was Dana Hill, and she had childhood diabetes. And yeah, she died. She was about 42, 43 years old when she died. And so that was very, very typical. So, but again, thankfully, thanks to modern medical science, it's gotten a lot better for kids with diabetes. Actually, I take that back. She was 92. I'm sorry, not 92. She was 32.
Oh, she was young. Man.
Yeah.
I wonder if she had gained weight and then that just added to it. She was
She
already.
died from a stroke. She had a stroke.
Oh.
maybe it was the 30s. That's how they lived to be, the 30s.
Yeah.
I thought she was older. That's what I was saying. But no, yeah. So like I said, kids with childhood diabetes back in that time, and she actually died in 1996. So yeah, she was 32. Yeah, National Lampoon's European Vacation. So anyway, so diabetes. So we know what caused it, which is what?
Sorry, what was your question?
I said, what causes diabetes?
Too much insulin or not enough insulin?
It's not too much insulin. Not enough insulin is correct. What else? Caesar, what else?
Would it be too much sugar?
Okay, there's too much sugar, but why is there too much sugar?
It's because the liver can't really store it.
Why? So
The
you're
sugar
telling
is
me,
metabolized.
the effects of diabetes, but you're not telling me the cause of diabetes. So Sequoia said one of them. There's not enough insulin, right? What's the other one? What do you think, Andrew? Wake up, Andrew.
That was honestly don't know.
I mentioned it in lecture a few minutes ago, and we're talking about it right now.
Isn't it the
What do you
ability
think, Frankie?
for the body not to let the sugar go into the cells from the blood?
Well, that kind of goes with what Sequoia was saying. What do you think, Frankie?
That's what I was thinking. I thought that was the other cause for the body not to let the sugar leave the blood into the cells.
You have now. So what Sequoia was saying and what you guys are telling me is that the pancreas is not producing enough insulin.
Correct.
Okay. So we've established that. There's another reason why a patient or a person would have diabetes. What do you think, Kevin? I'm picking on Fabin's today. Pick on Fabin's day. What do you think, Kevin? Or are you in the bathroom?
No, I'm here, sir.
All right. What's the other reason why a person would be diabetic?
Could it be because the body creates too much insulin?
Nope, we wouldn't be diabetic if the body created too much insulin.
Isn't it the receptors?
Nope. How many types of diabetes are there?
Two.
Or
Two. So we talked about one of them.
Do you mean the one where you get as a child?
Exactly. And what kind is that?
The juvenile one?
Okay, but what happens? To simplify it for you guys, it's a type 1 diabetic. What's the characteristic about a type 1 diabetic? Besides being juvenile onset.
that they need insulin all the time?
Why?
Because their body doesn't produce enough of it.
It's in their genetics.
It can be genetic, but diabetes doesn't necessarily is genetic.
Okay.
Now, for me, I was screwed. It's very genetic. Most everybody on my dad's side of the family has diabetes or had diabetes, but it's not necessarily genetic. What do you think, Mr. Paul?
I'm not even paying attention.
Oh, I'm on the phone right now. Sorry.
Oh,
Right.
dude.
You notice that's always his excuse.
I am.
As an
I'm on the
announcer,
phone.
I'm on the phone.
My AirPods on.
Liar.
See,
It wasn't on earlier.
pay you back. We're trying to pay you back. Anyway. No, guys, remember type 1 diabetes, they don't produce any insulin whatsoever. So that's the two types. That's what happens with diabetes. Either they don't produce any insulin or they don't produce enough insulin. Or by that same token, they have an issue. Maybe there's something wrong with the insulin. Okay. So no insulin or not enough insulin. That's the problem with diabetes. Okay. Type 1, no insulin whatsoever. Type 2, not enough insulin. Okay. So write that down in your notes. Type 1 diabetics produce no insulin. Type 2 diabetics produce very little insulin.
What type 1 you say?
No insulin production. Paul asked me to ask you guys any word on when you guys want to do CPR.
Anytime soon.
Whenever we can.
When is he available?
Didn't I talk about that with you guys? About Paul had said he's willing to come in on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday to do it.
Yeah.
No, I don't remember that.
Like 3-hour blocks. Squire remembers.
Of course, she's lying.
Of course, she's younger than you.
One of the recording.
Don't bring it, Lou. Don't bring age into it. It's chill.
That's why he doesn't pay attention.
What's that?
That's why he doesn't pay attention.
Oh.
Sequoia, chill. Chill.
So yeah, just kind of think about it. You know, he's a little flexible. But he said he's willing to come in Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
But you said you just want it in one day, right?
It would be better to do it in one day. It kind of take about 3.5-hour blocks. I mean, you guys do it on a Saturday, you get somebody there, what, 7 to 10, and then next group 10:30 to, or 11 to 2, and the next group 3 to 3 or 6.
That's fine. This week or the following week?
That works.
You guys tell me.
Do we have another option at the weekend?
Well, that's what I want to. That's kind of what I want to know is what do you guys think? I just brought that out as a suggestion. I didn't bring that out as a commandment or a command.
When shall we have access to the online CPR course?
You wouldn't get you wouldn't do it. He would do the actual class with you guys.
Okay.
Can you do it earlier?
What if we do those times on Friday?
Ow. Abe, you're killing my ear. So you guys decide. Let me know. Talk about it when we're done.
Whatever you choose, Sequoia.
Well, you guys tell her. Don't have. She's not a dictator. This is a class.
Oh, like I can do any time, so whatever you guys come up with.
But also remember, some of your classmates aren't in class. So. Anyway. All right. Anyway, so back to where we're at. So no insulin, very little insulin production. We can't get all the glucose into the cell because not enough insulin is being produced. All right. So because of that, what's going to happen to the glucose level in your blood?
For which one?
Either one. If you can't get glucose into the cell, what's going to happen to your blood glucose level?
It'll be low. You have a low blood glucose.
No. Because remember, that sugar is not getting into the cell. So what happens to that glucose?
It'll be high.
It's going to be high. Remember, if you can't get rid of that glucose is not going anywhere. It's going to stay in your blood. And elevated blood glucose levels is what we call hyperglycemia. Okay? Hyperglycemia. Now, when the blood sugar starts to go up, we're going to have what we call the 3 Ps. So that's how you can tell if a person is developing diabetes. And those 3 Ps are, number one, the first one is polydipsia. In other words, you're very thirsty all the time, so you're drinking lots of water. So when I went in to get diagnosed, I wasn't feeling very well for a couple of days. My vision started to change. And I remember going into work one day, and in the span of maybe 30 minutes, I had 7 water bottles. Drinking a lot of water. What's the other P?
Polyuria.
Polyuria, which means?
Excessive urination.
Yeah, you're peeing a lot. First off, you're drinking a lot of water. So therefore, now you have a lot of peeing. And what's the third P?
Polyphagia.
which means
You get hungry? Or wait.
yeah, excessive hunger. Why are you hungry?
Can you repeat that last one? What was that last one?
Polyphagia.
Polyphagia.
Because your body is requiring energy.
Okay, but don't you have it in your bloodstream?
Mm. Yeah, but I guess it's not metabolizing adequately.
Why?
Um,
The body is not producing enough insulin or not at all to break down sugars.
There you go. You're hungry because your body's needing that sugar, yet you are eating. You do have sugar, but it's just not going to the cell because of the lack of insulin production. So that's what's happening in this case. So the 3 P's: polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia. You're drinking a lot of water, you're peeing a lot, and you are eating a lot. So, like I said, when I went in, so I went to the clinic, I got an appointment that day, and I told them what was wrong, and right away they did a BGL on me. My blood glucose level was 499. What did I say the normal range was?
80 to 120.
80 to
80,
120.
And my sugar was 499. Pretty much 500. Is that a bad thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Okay. So that's what's happening. Okay. New onset diabetes, they're going to have the 3 P's. That's how you can kind of tell. All right. So what happens to the body? Now, how can I put this? All right. So to talk about the different diabetic emergencies. So we know what diabetes is, which again is what? It's an issue with the body's ability to produce insulin. And it's either what?
Type 1 or type 2, or not producing enough or not producing at all.
Okay, good. So either not producing at all or not producing enough insulin to get that glucose into the body. And we've already established that the body needs that glucose in order to create energy, right? ATP is needed for muscular contraction and a bunch of other processes. Okay. So now let's talk about what happens with sugar. So the diabetic emergencies. All right. So let's say a patient is taking their medicine, but they took more medicine that they needed, whether it's insulin or maybe their oral medications. They took it, but they didn't eat enough, and now something's going to happen. So your glucose level went down. So what I want you to think about when we're talking about hypoglycemia is think about the signs and symptoms of shock. Have you already learned the signs and symptoms of shock?
Yes.
All right. What are they? Prove it to me.
Altered mental status, tachycardia, tachypnea, clammy,
Clammy.
clammy.
I don't know. I think the thing's having issues because he just froze up. Never came back.
I don't see him on the thing. Do you guys see him on there?
No.
No, he was frozen for a while, but then he disappeared.
So when are we gonna meet up, or what time are you guys thinking?
It doesn't matter whenever you guys can.
What was that?
It doesn't matter whenever you guys can.
All right.
Just like you said, preferably just one day so that way we're not all scattered.
For this Friday though?
I was thinking like Friday of this week or maybe next week. I mean, of course, if everybody can.
I wouldn't be able to do it on the weekends. I work out of town the weekend.
I mean, we can do it Friday, but we could probably have one that's really early in the morning again.
I can't do it this Friday. So we would have.
Really?
He said
You thought you left?
I did. It froze up. I was getting irritated. It's like I asked a question, nobody was answering me because I'm on a different screen, and I looked, and I'm like, wait, are they still here? And I see Sequoia frozen, so I'm like, oh, okay. I guess my computer froze.
That's what they're
Yeah, I was
saying.
trying to log back in, and it wouldn't log back in. So,
Oh,
but I'm back.
okay.
No, I didn't ditch you guys.
Good.
I thought about it.
You're like, yeah, screw it.
But I
No,
made
we're
it back.
We were
I have
just
no
talking
trouble.
about the CPR when possibly everybody can come in.
Okay. Yeah, Jim's not ready.
The what?
No, I'm just looking at my folder here. I'm like, I got junk mail already.
We can probably do something for next week because I feel like this is a little bit too soon because we have our exam on Thursday and I'm pretty sure everybody wants to study.
Well, that would be for, but yeah, just tell me and I'll let him know.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Okay. So going back, so my question to you guys was, so those were the signs symptoms of shock. And we've established that what does the body need in order for it to function? Oxygen and
Glucose.
glucose. So can you see where not having any glucose or limited amount of glucose, it's going to go cause the body to have or to go into a state of shock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn. That buzz is like really killing my ear. All right. So that's what you're going to see with hypoglycemia. Basically, there's not enough sugar in the body. And one of the ways to do that, like I said, is think about shock. In that, if a person exercises too much, they use up their sugar. And so what just happened to their glucose level?
It went down.
It went
Decreased.
down. What was that?
No, it decreased.
Yeah, it decreased. It went down. One of the things that could happen if, for example, somebody's on insulin and they took their normal amount of insulin, yet they forgot to eat breakfast, for example. So what happened to their glucose level? Actually, let me stick to that. So they take their normal amount of insulin for what they normally eat. So their sugar be fine.
Yes.
Yes. Now,
Yeah.
again, going back to for the insulin, they took the normal amount of insulin. However, they forgot to eat breakfast. But this time, they didn't eat breakfast because they got busy. They went out into the yard, started working, or maybe they went to do some sort of exercise, or they did some physical activity that they normally don't do. Or maybe they did more of it than they normally do for whatever reason. So first off, they replenished the amount of glucose that they were going to use and need. Do you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so did they replenish that glucose?
Yes.
I didn't hear that.
What was that?
Yes.
No, they didn't, because they didn't eat.
Yeah, so I didn't hear your first part. So then, I thought you said they did eat.
No, they didn't. They did not eat.
Oh, okay. Didn't know.
Okay. So their glucose level goes down because they took their medication, or even if they take too much, also, it's going to cause the sugar to go down. Now, the other thing too is if they ate and they took their insulin, but they were more physically active than they normally are, is that going to burn up more sugar, more energy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, they just used up the available sugar, and they have nothing left. So the body is literally starving for some more sugar. And so again, think of it as shock, because it is something that the body needs, and it's something that the body's going to say, I want some more. Okay? So again, pale, clammy skin, weakness, also can have tremors. We talked about the pale, clammy skin, dizzy. Now, if it's affecting the brain, because again, the brain needs that glucose and there's not enough, now the brain's going to be drowsy, could be disoriented. They could even have seizures. Remember we talked about that yesterday with ALU tips? One that causes the seizures is insulin or lack of glucose.
When they have tremors, are those like noticeable?
Well, it's just they have the shakes.
Oh, okay.
It's just like when you're nervous or something and you start kind of shaking. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it like resorted somewhere else or it was just the regular shakes.
Yeah, the shakes is just because it's just like a hand tremor, and that does happen because you don't have enough sugar to kind of control it. So that's what's going to happen. Now, one of the unique things about diabetes, and then hypoglycemic emergency, to be more specific, is that it's a sudden onset. It comes on very, very quickly. And that's because, again, it's needed by the body in order for it to function. So the onset is going to be very, very quick. And so one of the things that happens to me when I feel my sugar drop is, yeah, my hands will start trembling. I feel weak. And then I start getting sweaty, and I'm sure I'd look pale as well. And so all that comes on very, very suddenly. Like right now, I could be sitting here, all of a sudden, I could start feeling the shake, start feeling weak, and start feeling sweaty. So that can happen. All right. What else about hypoglycemia? All right. If you've ever heard the term insulin shock, we don't use that term anymore. It's hypoglycemic emergency. What's hypoglycemia?
It's low blood glucose.
Low blood glucose. Good. So hypoglycemia, low blood glucose. All right. So any questions on hypoglycemia?
No.
Oh,
What was that? I'm sorry?
hyper or hypo?
Hypo.
Oh, okay.
Low blood sugar.
All right. So what do you think the treatment is for hypoglycemia emergency?
Oral
I
glucose.
think you guys learned it with Paul.
Yeah, the oral glucose.
There you go, oral glucose. However, to be able to administer oral glucose, that's an administration. It's not assisting the patient taking their own oral glucose. That's something that you'd carry, so you could actually administer that. So what are the contraindications or indications for administering oral glucose?
Has an altered mental status.
Okay, so they can't have an altered mental status. Why?
Because they
They're
won't be
unable.
open. They
What
won't
was
be
that?
able to swallow it.
There you go. Because they need to be able to protect their airway. They'll be unable to swallow. And so what can occur if you do administer oral glucose to a patient that's altered?
They start choking.
They could choke on it. Okay. So make sure the airway is open, that they are conscious. What else? How much oral glucose do you?
The whole tube.
The whole tube. Now, can you put glucose on a tongue depressor and put it between their cheek and the gum?
Yes.
Yes, you can. So in case they can't protect their airway, you could put some glucose on a tongue depressor and put it between the cheek and the gum. Let it
Is
get through that way.
Is that just the best way to do it? Should that be just your automatic go-to?
Not necessarily, because what if the patient is awake?
Okay.
Just give them the tube. If you're on a BLS truck and you don't have ALS available to do an IV and give them sugar directly into the blood, then yeah. But if ALS is available, or if you run with an advanced partner, whether an advanced EMT or a paramedic, then that's going to help, or they'll be able to take care of it. So I don't necessarily want to say yeah, but I don't want to say no. But it's a very good option. What else can you do for treatment? So you can give them glucose.
Oxygen if necessary.
Oxygen if necessary. Okay. Now, can you do a BGL?
Yes.
Yeah, get that BGL. If it's usually the protocols say if it's less than 80, you assist them with glucose, or you give them glucose. But follow your protocols because some of them will say 70.
Yeah, the book says
Now
70.
what was that?
The book says 70.
Yeah. Like my protocols in Sierra Blanca say less than 80. What about what if you don't have a BGL and you get called for a diabetic person? What, and you don't know whether they're hyperglycemic or hypoglycemic. Do you give them glucose?
Yeah.
Why?
You don't want it to be a hypoglycemic patient and retain that glucose from the patient. So just err on the side of him of hyperglycemia.
But if their sugar is high, then what?
They'll just have a little bit more sugar, but it won't really alter their mental status.
Correct. I mean, if they're already at high sugar, it's just going to get higher. And they'll give them insulin at the hospital. So it's not a biggie. In a way it is, but it is for our purposes. It's not a biggie. So yeah, just err on the side of caution. If you don't know whether they're hyper or hypo, just give them the oral glucose. But like I said, one of the key ways to know whether the person's hyper or hypo is with a hypoglycemic patient, the skins are going to be pale, cool, and clammy, and it's going to be a sudden onset. Whereas with hyperglycemia, it's going to be the opposite. Skin's going to be warm, flushed, and dry. And it's going to be a gradual onset. So over a period of time. And I can't give you an exact period of time because everyone's different. Some it might take a few hours, some might take a few days, but usually it's a few days. How many days? Again, it's all dependent on the person. So I can't give you an exact number. Okay. So that's the best way to tell. So when you read test questions, I completely forgot you guys had a quiz. And I even emailed you guys the link. Come nobody reminded me. You guys are too quiet.
You said you emailed us the link?
Yeah, I emailed you guys the link.
No, you one thing we got
I didn't get anything.
chapter 3 PowerPoint. That was it.
I could have sworn I emailed out the link.
For which PowerPoint?
I emailed it out at 7:46 this morning.
I don't think I got anything.
Yeah, neither did I. All I got was just the PowerPoint from yesterday.
Yeah, for 20, yeah.
Did you just get that?
Yeah, I just got that.
Okay. So don't do it yet. I'll be done in a little bit. So, all right. So my next thing is this. When there's too much blood sugar it is bad for the body. Because remember, we were talking about that fluid tends to go where the sugar is. Remember that at the beginning?
Yes.
Okay. Or at the beginning of today. So if there's too much blood sugar, what's happening to the water within the cell and then within the interstitial space?
It's accumulating
Where?
inside the cell.
No. The glucose, because there's a lot of glucose in the blood, where's that water going to go to? The cellular or the interstitial? So reestablish this concept. So what does water do?
It follows the sodium.
Okay, it follows sodium, but it also follows glucose, right?
Right.
It follows glucose, it follows sodium. So if there's a lot of glucose in the blood, what's going to happen to that interstitial and intracellular fluid?
Not able to pass.
No. I'm probably somebody. Maybe I'm making myself 100% clear. Again, fluid follows glucose. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of glucose in the blood. Where's the fluid in the interstitial and intracellular space going to go?
In the blood.
Into the blood. If there's a lot of glucose in the blood, then that interstitial and intracellular fluid is going to go into the blood. So what is happening to the body when it's losing fluid at the interstitial and intracellular level?
So, repeat that one more time, Lou. What is happening?
What's happening to the body when it's lacking fluid in the interstitial and intracellular space?
Is it starting to break down?
No, not yet.
Dehydrating it?
There you go. It becomes dehydrated.
Oh, because of, okay.
Because you're losing volume, right? It's going into the bloodstream. So remember the three?
Yes.
What was the first one?
Polydipsia.
Polydipsia, which means?
Oh.
What's polydipsia?
George said it.
Thirsty?
Was that?
Thirsty.
Yeah, excessive thirst.
Yeah.
And why is the person excessively thirsty?
Because they're dehydrated.
Because they're dehydrated. And so the way to think about hyperglycemia, and it used to be known as diabetic coma, is because the body is dehydrated. And so remember I talked about the skin? What's the skin going to be like in hyperglycemia when it's dehydrated?
Warm, flush, and dry.
There you go. And you're going to be thirsty as well. Are you going to be hungry?
Yes.
Yeah, that too. So think about hyperglycemic crisis or hyperglycemic emergency as the patient being dehydrated because they're losing fluid to the bloodstream because the bloodstream has a lot of sugar. Okay. So, what other signs and symptoms do you have of hyperglycemia?
It's a slower onset than hypoglycemia.
It's low onset.
Then polyuria.
Okay.
Doesn't it cause electrolyte imbalance?
It can cause an electrolyte imbalance. So muscle cramps are common because you're dehydrated.
And doesn't it also will eventually cause brain to fail because it's not getting enough like the I just lost my train of thought now.
Yeah, because it's getting dried out. Also, you'll have altered status, confusion, weakness. We talked about the dry, warm skin, maybe flushed, peeing a lot because there's a lot more fluid being taken out of the blood. But that excess sugar, remember, excess sugar gets secreted out in the urine, but still, as that excess sugar or the excessive sugar is being filtered out, it damages the nephrons or the filters of the kidneys. And that's one reason why diabetics with uncontrolled sugar, diabetes, go into renal failure, because all that sugar damaged the kidneys. How about tachycardia?
Yeah.
They also have signs of dehydration, such as a positive orthostatic vital. In other words, we talked about orthostatic vitals, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Blood pressure and pulse, laying down, sitting up, and standing up. Okay. So that's the emergency. Now, have you guys heard of the Atkins diet? It's a little bit older diet, but it's very similar to its new cousin. You guys don't know what I'm talking about?
The keto.
There you go. The keto diet. What is the goal of the keto diet?
I don't know.
Isn't it based on carbs and fats?
Yeah. Well, what I meant with what's the goal of the keto diet is to lose weight.
Right.
And how do you achieve that goal?
By starving yourself using the fat that you used to have.
Not necessarily.
Just
Not
watch
necessarily.
TV.
Drinking water, no, with like Epsom salt and some
Your intake.
else.
Huh?
Your intake.
What about your intake?
How much you eat, or how much, or what you drink, or.
I think Luis was saying. I think it was Luis talking about carbs.
I think that was George.
Oh, it's George. Okay.
Was it carbs and whatever else? What did you say, George?
Carbs and fats.
Fats.
High fat, high carb diet.
You're actually eating carbs?
I don't know. I don't really know about it, Lou. I guess I read it somewhere, so I'm not sure.
I think you're just drinking water like Epsom salt and something else.
For keto?
Okay, so then
You
it
don't need
is
that
different
thing.
than the Atkins diet. So
It's like a bear. Like, you know, they eat and then they go to sleep, and since they hibernate and have so much fat, something like that. Because I tried it like once. I don't know if it's the same one. That's what I'm thinking about it.
I can't tell you. I thought it was similar to the Atkins diet. The Atkins diet was very popular back in the early turn of the century. And I think even in the late last century. The Atkins diet, it was basically to eliminate carbs. And so people were still eating fats. Like you go to, let's say, Whataburger, although I prefer In-N-Out, and you ask for a protein burger. So what they did was they gave you a hamburger but wrapped in lettuce instead of in a hamburger bun, because bread is what?
Carbohydrate.
It's carbs. It's carbs. Okay. And so carbs are good for what for the body? What do they give you?
Turns into sugar.
It turns into the sugars. However, what they're trying to do is lose weight. So do you really need more sugar?
No.
No.
And so the way that diet works, and I thought the keto diet worked the same way, is that by eliminating carbs, you're forcing the body to get sugar from someplace else, because you're kind of starving it of sugars. You've eliminated the carbs. And so now the body needs to find a new store, or basically a new store. It needs to find a new supplier of glucose. And where did it find that supply at?
From your own body.
Yes, but where? Where in your own body?
The liver?
Nope. Although it can get it from the liver, but remember also it needs to be replenished later on. So right now it needs a burst of energy, and it goes to the liver, utilizing glucagon to get that burst. So what is it going to do? It's going to get it from the fat.
Oh.
Okay? Because it needs a production, it's going to find it in the fat. Now, here's the bad news about burning fat to create energy. It's the waste product. Because normally, what is the waste product of aerobic metabolism? Guys, this is stuff that we've covered before. It should already be in your memory banks. What is the byproduct of burning sugar? What's the normal byproduct of aerobic metabolism?
ATP.
Okay, we get ATP. What else? We get ATP, we get water, we get heat, and we get carbon dioxide. Okay. I learned this in 1997 and 1999. If I could still remember it all this time, you guys should be able to remember it, since we've only been in class for 1.5 months, even close to 2 months. Have we been, what was it, April 13th that we started? Yeah.
Yeah, around there.
April, May. Yeah, we're coming up on 2 months. So anyway, so that's byproduct. However, the byproduct of, it's out of here soon, but that's not going to happen. The byproduct of burning sugar, or I'm sorry, burning fat, is ketones. The type of acetone. And now with ketones, though, the body doesn't like ketones in the body. or inside of it, and it treats it as an acid because that's what it is. It's creating acid. So what do you think the body's going to do?
It's gonna urinate, like you're gonna urinate it out. You're trying to get rid of it.
Trying to get rid of the ketones? So yeah, it will be found in the urine. What else?
Large amount of water is also like you peed out of.
Well, yeah, because you have all that glucose in your body. Yeah, you're drawing out more fluid from within itself, the cells and the interstitial areas. But what the body's going to try to do is it's going to try to break down that acid. Try and break down that acid to bring the body back to a basic level because it's becoming acidic.
And when it breaks it down, like what goes on from there as it breaks down? When it's breaking down the acid?
Yeah, the body's going to break down the acid using bicarbonate. And as it breaks down the acid, it becomes eventually becomes carbonic acid, which broken down even further is going to become H2O and CO2. What's H2O?
Okay.
Water.
Water.
Water. And so what's the body going to do with water?
Get rid of it.
No.
I mean, well,
Into the blood?
Yeah, it reabsorbs it because isn't it needing water? And
Yes.
normally the body does reabsorb some of the water that's in the blood. And other stuff gets urinated out, but it's going to reabsorb that water. And now the other byproduct is what?
Heat.
CO2.
Yes.
And what does the body do with CO2?
Freeze it out.
It breathes it out. Now, because of that excess glucose breakdown, because of the ketones, what's happening to your carbon dioxide level?
It's increasing.
It's increasing. Is the body going to say something about that?
It's gonna go into anaerobic since it's collecting.
No, because there's still oxygen coming in.
Okay.
It's just there's a buildup of carbon dioxide because of the breaking down of all those ketones. Because the body had to create its energy, right? It has to meet its needs, and so it's breaking down fats to get that energy more than it used to. So as it breaks it down, we said there's a buildup of carbon dioxide, and so the body's going to breathe faster to get rid of it, right? Because again, I'm trying to get you guys to go back and give me that review. Why is it breathing faster?
To get rid of the carbon dioxide.
Okay, but what was the precursor to breathing faster? It was the elevated CO2 levels that the the chemoreceptors detected in the body, and because we have our carbonic drive that drives our ability to breathe, or drives that manages our drive to breathe, that our breathing sped up to get rid of that excess CO2, right?
Yes.
So it's the carbonic drive that is saying, hey, I got too much carbon dioxide, help me blow it off. And so our respiratory rate is going to go up to get rid of, eliminate that extra CO2. Now, what did we say was the byproduct of breaking down ketones? or I'm sorry, breaking down fat. I just gave it to you.
Is it an acetone?
Yeah, acetone, ketone. Okay. How does acetone smell? Or how does it smell like? What's it smell like?
Sweet.
Sweet, fruity odor. That doesn't get broken down. So when the person's exhaling rapidly, what's that breath going to smell like?
Sweet.
Sweet.
Sweet. Okay. So they describe it like the juicy fruit bubble gum. It's gonna be sweet. Now the respiratory rate's gonna be fast, but we call that respiration Kuzma respiration. Remember learning about that a while back?
Labored breathing.
Yeah, it's a type of labored breathing, but it's rapid, shallow breathing with pursed lips. I wasn't even looking at the camera. So it kind of looks like, okay, because the body's trying to blow off that excess CO2, that excess carbon dioxide. Okay. Okay. So again, it's the body trying to take care of itself. Now, everything we just talked about occurs with type 1 diabetics. And we call that condition diabetic ketoacidosis, also known as DKA. Now, the reason being is because, remember, the type 1 diabetics don't produce any insulin whatsoever. DKA can happen at low BGL levels. They don't do very well with really high blood sugar levels. 200, and that's high. Whereas a type 2 diabetic, 200 is just like, that's nothing. And a lot of Hispanic diabetics, Hispanic diabetics, 200 is actually low for them. Normally like around 300, 400. So any wonder why a lot of Hispanics are on dialysis? Because they don't take care of themselves. Okay.
Tortillas.
All right. Huh?
Tortillas.
No, it's three.
Not just tortillas though, but yeah, tortillas de harina. Make me hungry. Yeah. So that's what's gonna start happening there. Okay. Type 1 diabetics, no insulin production. They're gonna go in DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. Now, type 2 diabetics, remember, we do produce some insulin. So we're not gonna be DKA. I've had the highest I've seen my sugar was a little bit over 600. And I had students really pissed off at me. I'm like, leave me alone. So blood glucose in a type 2 diabetic can get pretty high and not be in DKA. We could be in a condition called, the book calls it HHS, which is hyperosmolar syndrome. And so kind of the same thing too, is that glucose is drawing out a lot of water from the cells. It's going into the urine, but it draws out or burns up less fat than DKA does. So there's less ketones being produced. Now the problem with type 2 diabetics and HHS, although I learned HHNK, although don't ask me what that means because I forgot, there could be a lot more dehydrated than the DKA patients. Okay. So I had a request about you guys taking a break. So let's take a break. Be back at 10:20.
Sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good.
Or actually, I'll be back at 10:20 and start the quiz then, so we can get it out of the way.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. I'll see you guys.